Hey, Dirk here from Dirk's Dystopia. Today I want to go into a little bit of a tutorial for painting flames. I went with a fairly simple scheme to paint the flames. I have a Salamander's army, so I didn't want to have a really complicated or difficult way to paint the flames on the vehicles and things like that. So I'll come back, I'll show you kind of an example of the flames I'm going for, and then we'll get into the actual art of painting the flames. See you in a sec. Okay, here we go. This is the flames I have done before. This is on a Land Raider Proteus, the non-assault ramp one. And you can see it's fairly simple. I think tabletop wise though, it looks really good just sitting there. Look too close, you can kind of see the variations a little bit more, but I didn't want to spend a ton of time blending. I did also the same style on this Contemptor's front carapace there. So that's what we're going for. We're going to put it on this Sakaran battle tank here. We're going to use in this little spot right there. I'm not a huge fan of the way the this comes up so far, so we'll see how I can blend the flames in with that. Should be interesting. Working on that. And then this is the paint I'm using. So I kind of have a range of paints. I go from Mephiston Red to Troll Slayer Orange, Fire Dragon Bright, Uriel Yellow, Flash gets yellow, and then I'm going to end with a very light dry brush of White Scar to try and intensify the depth of the flame a little bit. Full disclaimer, I am going to be painting directly out of the pots here. I know it's sacrilege. I find for the small amounts of paint I use for this, I end up wasting way more paint pulling it out and putting on a palette. But this is how I'm going to do it. I tend to thin my paints in the pot when I get them. Again, I know that's not the standard way, but it does work well for me, and I'm going to keep doing it. If I'm going to paint a large area, I will pull paint out of the pot and put it on a palette, but for the small area here, the pot doesn't stay open for very long. So that's what we're going to do. When I come back, we'll be focused in on the battle tank, and we'll start with the Mephiston Red. All right, here we go. I'm going to see if I can paint this without blocking the shot too much. The camera is behind me, so it should be fun. Probably see my shadow come across a couple times, but I'll see what I can do. Starting with Mephiston Red, I am using a Army Painter Insane Detail, Wargamer Insane Detail brush. I really like these brushes. They've done some good work for me. So I'm going to start by trying to just block off the area of the flames. Most of this tank is done, so I want to try and keep as much off the green so I don't have to repaint all of that. But essentially the whole area will start red, and we'll work on adding in the flames, the tongues of the flames licking up in a second, but I just want to get red over the whole thing. I'm not really interested in a wonderful complete coverage of red. There are several layers going over this yet, so really just trying to get a base red so that the lighter colors won't show the black through quite as much. By the time I finish, there is 6 layers of progressively lighter colors over the top of this, so not a ton of risk of the black coming through, but I do like to start with this red base. I think it helps the overall effect. So I'm trying to build up the flames here. Because of the design of the tank, I don't have a ton of room between the hatch and the bottom of the black plate here, so most of the red will be out on the sides, as you can see, and we'll kind of lower it down, kind of a smooth arc down on the left and the right side in order to show what we're looking for here. Okay, so I've got a pretty good area for the red blocked out, and I'm going to start putting in some flames. Okay, I think I like that. So it's fire, so it doesn't have to be perfect or even. I do like to try and make it somewhat symmetric so the tank just doesn't look offsided or lopsided. But from here, I'm just going to start bringing a tongue up like so. They kind of come up and curve. I do aim for a very sharp point if possible. Sometimes that means you have to go back and thicken the bottom so you have a little bit more room without making it look awkward. This is probably the biggest brush I would use for this. I'm not good at coming to a point on a bigger brush. I know some people can really have really good brush control, but that is not one of my skills. So just another tongue coming up. I try and make the whole thing look smooth. You don't want the tongues coming out at right angles or real sharp angles. That's just not the way flames work. This is difficult because flames are a very dynamic thing. I'm sure you've all watched campfires or things like that. So they're always moving, right? But we're trying to capture that in a moment in time. So we got to play around with that just a little bit. This is a little bit awkward because of the angle of the camera. Normally I would be slightly more in front of the model, but I can't right now, so I'm kind of off to the side trying not to block your shot. It's working. So I would still say I'm blocking out the flames. I'm going to come back in probably with a slightly smaller brush and just try and smooth out some of the bigger angles and get a little bit of a finer point on some of this stuff. I don't actually have a plan or a thought here. I'm just kind of randomly creating tongues of flame coming up. Just trying to be a little bit more random. It's not really in my nature. I want to make a pattern, but fire doesn't necessarily make patterns, so trying to let the paint speak to me and kind of just feel out something that doesn't look too regimented, too stiff. Just going back in and filling in some of the red in the darker areas now that it's dried a little bit. The paint is fairly thin here, probably milk consistency, not skim milk I wouldn't say, but definitely a little bit thicker than water for sure, but you don't want too thick for this. It makes it really hard to draw things to a point for a lot of this. Trying not to block the shot here. I just need to smooth some stuff out over there. Okay, so just washing that brush off real quick. Grabbing a Army Painter Wargamer the Psycho. Fairly small tip. Again, I'm just going to try and use this. You don't want to use this to try and paint on the red through the bigger areas, but it helps to kind of help smooth out the points and get rid of some of the other blockier areas. It's a much finer point. Doesn't hold a lot of paint on the brush, so that's why it's not really good for those bigger areas, but it works nice for this type of thing where you're just going to go back in and smooth out some of the points. Again, it's flame. I don't worry too much about making sure it's all perfect. A lot of the stuff can get smoothed out later when we start bringing in other colors. But I just go through, I try to make sure there's none of these square looking or right angle type things. More smooth, either a V, a real sharp V, or more of a U type thing, but not square. So there we have blocked out red for the flames. Washing that brush off. We're going to pull out Troll Slayer Orange. These are Games Workshop colors. I like Games Workshop colors. They work well for me, but certainly not necessary to use Games Workshop colors. Lots of other great manufacturers make some real high quality paints. Any of them would do. The main thing is just to get a good subtle gradation between your darkest color and your lightest color. You don't want to do it in 2 or 3 phases. You want 5 or 6 or even more if you're really trying to blend it. If you want to mess around with mixing paints, this is a good time to do that. But not really interested in doing that. I always have trouble getting the right mix again another time, so I like to just stick with some pre-mixed stuff. All right, so I have some Control Slayer orange on my brush. Again, I'm going to go back through and I'm essentially just blocking all this out again, but I want to leave a sliver of red along the edges all the way around. So I don't want to just cover the red completely. I do want to show some red along the edges. This is going to start adding that depth to the flame. And this is also why you want a bunch of colors if possible. You don't want to make this in 2 or 3. I just don't think you can show that, the subtlety of it all. And I'm using that bigger brush. I'm back on the Insane Detail brush just to block this out. Again, the smaller brush doesn't hold a ton of paint, and I don't really want to try and put this much paint on here with that brush. So we'll switch back to the littler brush when we get up to the points of the flame, the tongues of the flame up there. As we keep going. Okay. Again, you just want to try and get orange across the bigger areas. Kind of a trial by error thing here. Exactly how far can you go up with this brush? I have some experience, not a ton. I've only done some flames. And I just want to get some more orange down here. This paint looks like it's a little thicker than I actually should be using now. I'm not going to take the time to go thin it on camera here, but it will work for what I need it to do. If I was going to do a larger area or more models, I would definitely take the time to bring this back down to a thinner consistency. Okay, washing that brush, pulled out the Psycho again. Now we have to be a little more careful, try and be a little more sure-handed, but I want to bring this orange up the tongue of flames. Again, I want to leave some red showing along all the edges. This is the trickier part. If you are trying to win painting awards or something, you're definitely going to want to do some sort of blending, be it wet blending or subtle shade changes. But my goal here is that when it's sitting on the table, people can look at it and say, oh wow, that looks really good. If you get a little closer, you can definitely see the changes. It's not a subtle gradation, but I also don't want to spend forever painting my 30K army. I do enjoy painting, but I also do enjoy playing, and I like to play with fully painted models, so I do need a quicker scheme so when I get new models I can get them out and on the table. Good. So the goal here also, I didn't mention before, but you don't want a ton of paint on here. You do want it to dry. You don't want to wait an hour between each and every shade or coat on here. You want to be able to just get on to the next color. I'm just going back and filling it a little bit. I did up here, I got a little more orange outside of where I would have normally wanted it. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Again, flame's very dynamic, so I'm not going to fret over a slightly out of shape shade. I'm going to switch over to Fire Dragon Bright. This is just a little bit of a lighter orange. You can probably see the pattern I'm working on here. I'm going to do the same thing I just did. If I can get the lid to stay open, this is part of the problem with painting out of the pot. I'm going to use the same pattern. I'm going to fill in, block in this lighter orange. You can see it's not a ton different, but it is enough of a difference to help with gradation and flame. But I want to leave some of that orange showing underneath. Okay? It's going to be a little trickier. I mentioned earlier I don't like the way this front armor plate sticks up so much into the black area that I'm painting flames in. It's going to be hard to show all of the colors through that area, but I'm gonna see what I can do. Painting is always we'll call it an adventure for me. I'm never quite sure what's going to happen. I wouldn't rank myself as a really good painter. I can fake it pretty well. Again, if you look real close, though, you can usually see the things that a good painter would cover up. I always like to tell people the joy about painting is if you mess up, you can just paint over it. It does require a little bit more patience, but it is true. You don't have to fret over anything too much. Panic because you messed up something. Okay, so I've blocked in that lighter orange. I'm going to grab the Psycho again. Now again, a little bit more carefully though, I'm going to drag this up into the flame. Now it's getting real thin. This is probably the last color that's going to go farther up into the flame. Just don't have room anymore with the other colors to get that far up. They're going to be more of a underneath the flame. They'll come up just a little bit into the bottom of the tongue, the start of the tongue, but this will be the last one that tries to get up in so far. Last one, just kind of a longer flame. We do want some orange up there. And here we go. Good. So we've got orange. It was my last orange. We are going to switch to yellow here now. Uriel yellow. I don't know if that's how you say it, but we're going to go with Uriel. Y-R-I-E-L. Might be the last time I used a bigger brush to block stuff in. If you do notice, some of this paint is still fairly wet. I'm okay with that. If nothing else, it does add into the blending a little bit. But doesn't seem to have too much of an issue. This would be one of those times where you'd be careful if you're pulling it out of the pot, though, like I am, instead of putting it on a palette, because if I got a little bit of orange on here and then stuck it back in there, you could definitely change the shade of the color a little bit, depending on how close or slight your gradations are. You could very easily change the shade enough to make a difference. I'm not worried about that, so I'm going to just continue on like I'm doing. So bringing in that yellow, you can see that the shade changes are definitely starting to work. You look real close, you can definitely see the differences between each line or each stage, but if you back up a little bit, it's a much harder thing to see. Now here I'm just going to bring it up a little bit. We're not getting all the way up into the tongues like I was saying before, just getting up into the bottom, the start of the tongue. Kind of smoothing things out. There we go. Looks like it needs a little bit more yellow over here, still a little bit predominantly orange. There we go. Really, you're just kind of looking to make the change as subtle as possible. So you just leave a little bit of the previous color showing. So that's Uriel yellow. We're going to finish up with our last bit of yellow here, Flash Git yellow. This is going to be the very subtle one. I am still using the Insane Detail brush, not the Psycho, because I'm just not going up into the flames. It's not really forcing an issue on any of this. So this is going to be primarily the deepest part of the flame. We are just trying to make that look really, really hot, very bright. So there wasn't a lot of room for yellow up at the top there, but I think I got enough in to make the gradation apparent. This one works really well to really just make that flame look hot. There we go. I'm going to call that good. All right, so the tricky part is going to be white. I have some white scar. I want to dry brush this on there, but there isn't a ton of room to dry brush. There isn't a very wide or large margin for error on this dry brushing. So we're going to be real careful. I have a Army Painter small dry brush. If I can get it in front of the camera, there we go. Small dry brush. It's got kind of a point. Works well, I found. Do like their brushes a lot. They hold up really well. I'm not going to call myself real good on my brushes. I sometimes don't really take care of them as well as I should. Dry brushes especially are rough. So I'm just trying to get a little bit of paint. I have just a tiny bit of white on there. I'm going to brush it off on a paper towel over here really well. I don't want a lot of white here at all. And then I'm just going to come in and I'm just really trying to get these deep areas as much as possible while keeping it off the green. We're not looking for a ton of color into this. I'm not really trying to leave a lot of white behind, but enough to make it look a little hotter. That's kind of the goal here. So I should wait a little bit longer to do this. I picked up some yellow. In this case, it worked well with blending. You gotta be careful not to stick that yellow back into the pot though. That will not end well. Any amount of yellow in the white's gonna start dirtying it up pretty well. Okay, so that is the basic flames. Because it's salamanders, I am gonna put some embers down at the base, and I'm gonna get set up to do that, and I will be back to finish that little tiny bit up at the end. Okay, we're back. I have mixed up some real thin brown Rhinox hide. If I get it in front, so it's right there. It's very thin. So what I'm looking for here is to get, I'm going to move this across the front of the camera. There we go. I'm going to try and get the little dots, the little brown dots at the base of the fire here, the embers. But I don't want them to be solid. I want them to be fairly see-through. So if I got the consistency right, there we go. So it's just kind of a water droplet. You don't want a lot of paint on here. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to go through, trying to make some non-standard shaped blobs, for lack of a better word. So not squares, not circles, just trying to fill it all in. I want some to be a little darker than others, some to be lighter, almost see-through, and we're just gonna keep moving through and filling this in. You don't want, I don't go up too far into the tops of the fire. You just want to stay near the base. I haven't decided what I'm going to do or how far I'm going to go up with this. I think I might end here and see how this looks, and then pick it up again over here. You really just want these in the deeper, brighter areas of the flame where the heat, the most amount of heat would go. Again, we're not looking for perfectly shaped, not uniform shape. We just want kind of random, some really big, some smaller. Easier to make the big ones than it is the smaller. A lot of paint loads up on this brush because it's so thin. Should be clearing it off just a little bit. Okay, so I'm trying to decide if I like the way that looks with the none at the top. I don't think I do, so I'm going to have to try and change that up a little bit. Let's see what I can do about that. I'm just touching up some of these. So I'm going to go and try and get just a little bit. I'm going to see if I can just get some small dots along this top edge of the armor plate. There we go. Don't need a ton, but I do feel like there should be some down there. So putting it real close to the bottom, the top of the armor plate, the bottom edge of the flame up here. And some of it tends to run together a little bit, but it's workable right now. Really just looking to break up the brightness of the fire down there. Touch up some of these other ones that got a little lighter than I wanted. Here we go. So that's embers on the flame. Because these are so thin up here, it's a little bit more difficult to see them. I'll touch them up again. May wait till they dry and touch them up one more time and see if I can get them to pick up. But other than that, I think that is pretty close to being done. If you have any questions, go ahead and let me know. I'll see if I can help as best I can. This is just kind of a technique I've developed over the last bit, and it works quick. It doesn't take a long time, which is kind of nice when you're painting a lot of it. Thanks for watching.